Today is Thursday, November 14th. And in my opinion, these are the 5 best teams in college football, 1 through 5. And then we'll talk about a couple additional teams. The 3 best teams, you can put them in any order you want, but the 3 best teams that are just a head and shoulder better than everybody else in college football are Ohio State, LSU, and Alabama. Ohio State's incredibly deep. They are phenomenal on offense or phenomenal on defense. They have talent everywhere. Ohio State just murdered Maryland 73-14 the other day. And they didn't even have their best player, Chase Bryce, who's probably the best player in all of college football. They're a dominating team that's just incredibly good. Then you look at LSU and Alabama, and LSU beat Alabama by 5 points. But let's be very honest, don't be silly here. If LSU plays Alabama 10 times, they both win probably 5 of those times. They're very well matched. And if you're going to put LSU, if you're going to say LSU is the best team in the nation, you can't fail to mention that Alabama's right there. I mean, they're neck and neck, very similar teams. If Alabama has a little better game or a couple things go a little bit differently, Alabama beats LSU. So in my opinion, the 3 best teams in all of college football are Ohio State, LSU, and Alabama. And it's really them 3 and then everybody else. Now, my 4th ranked team, in my opinion, the 4th best team in college football is Clemson. My number 5 is Oregon. The reason why Clemson and Oregon are in 4 and 5, and the reason why Clemson is 4 ahead of Oregon, is both Clemson and Oregon slipped up. Clemson almost lost to North Carolina. Now, Oregon did lose to Auburn. They did lose. And not only that, not only is Clemson undefeated, Oregon has 1 loss. Oregon also almost lost to Washington State, and Mike Leach's incredible offense. So I really think Oregon is phenomenal. They're changing things. Mario Cristobal, their head coach, values offensive linemen. They are pushing teams around in the Pac-12. Oregon pushed around USC, and it wasn't really close. But Oregon, to me, is the 5th best team in the nation and the best team in the Pac-12. And their 1 loss to Auburn, I don't think should be held against them. Right now, Auburn looks really, really good. Auburn lost to LSU by 3 points, and they beat Oregon, who are, Oregon and LSU are, in my top 5 ranked teams. But I don't want to punish Oregon too much for losing to Auburn. Oregon took a chance. They took a risk that I think other teams are unwilling to take. Week 1 of the college football season, Oregon went to a neutral site, which is far closer to Alabama, Dallas, Texas. They played Arlington, Texas. They played in AT&T Stadium where the Dallas Cowboys play. And Oregon played against Auburn. They lost a really close game. And to me, that's just, you can punish them if you want. I don't see any other teams in the top 5. LSU, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson. Nobody's taking a risk that Oregon took to play a top-ranked team at a neutral site this year. And so I think that deserves respect. That's why Oregon's in my top 5. Utah's really close to Oregon. Oregon and Utah are both 8-1 in the Pac-12. But Utah has a better defense, in my opinion. I understand that. But to me, what it comes down to is Oregon's quarterback, Justin Herbert, is a difference, and that's why I'm putting Oregon ahead of Utah, because I think Oregon can go a lot farther. They have better offensive linemen and a better quarterback that I think can carry them a little bit farther than Utah's quarterback can carry them. I know Utah has this great defense, and here's my evidence for why I think Utah has a better defense than Oregon. I know that Utah lost to USC, and USC got trounced by Oregon. But the reason why Utah lost to USC is because Utah had a couple of key injuries on defense and gave up some cheap deep balls into double coverage that really should not have been touchdowns. Here's the best example of why Utah, in my opinion, is better than Oregon. When Utah was healthy, they shut down Washington State's offense. Washington State and Mike Leach really struggled to throw the ball against Utah because Utah played really physical football with their secondary and dominated. And I heard guys from Washington State's sideline whining and whimpering. I was at the game broadcasting. They're whining and whimpering about, what do we do? What do we do in the red honest when we're catching the ball? It's like, be physical. And they had no answer. Now, a couple weeks later, Oregon could not stop Washington State. Oregon gave up 35 points and almost lost to Mike Leach and Washington State. So that game to me is really the litmus test. How do you handle that? I was not impressed with the way Oregon did handle that game at all. So I think Oregon is better than Utah because of their quarterback and their offensive line. but Utah does have a better defense than Oregon. I want to give them credit for that. People in Utah, I hope you appreciate that. Minnesota and Baylor are both undefeated. Now, Minnesota's wins to me are more impressive than Baylor. Baylor barely beat TCU the other day. But both teams, Minnesota and Baylor are both very good teams that I think should get very good bowl games. I hope they do. I hope Minnesota goes to the Rose Bowl, honestly. But Minnesota is a good team. They're not a college football playoff team. Baylor is a good team. They do not belong in the college football playoff, in my opinion. They're not one of the best teams in college football. They've been very fortunate with a good schedule. They won a lot of close games, but to me, I'm not that impressed. Like Minnesota beat Penn State the other day, and I think, as cool as that win was, to me, it's really a situation where Penn State was more overrated, and I don't think Minnesota's underrated. It's Penn State, the team they beat, was just overrated, and people thought too highly of them. Now, Georgia. The last team I want to mention is the University of Georgia. They're 8-1. They deserve a mention because they have top-notch talent. They're just so, when you watch the tape, oh my gosh, they're pushing people around. They have incredible receivers. Georgia is incredibly, incredibly deep, and I think has one of the best, most talented teams in college football, even though they lost, right? I think they belong in the conversation with Oregon, Clemson, Oregon, Clemson. I don't mean to throw Utah in there at all. They're not. Georgia's far more. Georgia would annihilate Utah, by the way. But I think Oregon's up there. I think Clemson. I think Alabama, LSU, Ohio State. Georgia belongs in that conversation with those teams. The problem is, and Georgia has this great defense. The problem is, Georgia's offensive coaching is holding them back. They're just limited on offense, and they don't have creative play design. And Georgia makes LSU look really good, or maybe LSU makes Georgia look really bad. But when you compare them, LSU last year realized that their weakness was their offense. They were like, okay, we have a problem. We need help on offense. And so LSU hired a guy named Joe Brady from the Saints to become their passing game coordinator and innovate on offense. Georgia needs to make a similar move to that. Georgia needs to find something and make a similar move. Jake Fromm is a really good quarterback at Georgia. He needs help. And they need somebody in Georgia to design a new offense and have more creative play calling to take advantage of the top-level talent that Georgia has. It's so, I think, frustrating and hard to watch Georgia because it's all, the pieces are all there, and they don't have the coaching to execute on offense. So I wanted to mention 8-1 Georgia. They're close to that conversation. They're not in my top 5, but they're like right below it. They just need a new coach. If they got a new coach on offense, I think they could do something really, really special. So, guys, my top 5, my how would I put this? I think the 5 best teams in college football are Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Clemson, and Oregon. And then Georgia's right there, but Georgia's limited on offense. They're like 5.5, Georgia is, because I think their offense is holding them back. My name is Zach Schaumler. This is my podcast, Strong Opinion Sports. It's my favorite thing in the entire world. And I want to be very clear, open, and transparent. My YouTube channel is monetized. What that means is that some of my videos make money through ad revenue. Now, it's fewer than you think. A lot of my videos get claimed. But in the past, I've received donations from Patreon and PayPal. PayPal.me/Zach Schaumler. Patreon.com/Zach Schaumler. And so because I'm making ad revenue, it feels weird to just get donations. I wanted to give something back. I want to give people a reward for supporting me on Patreon. So now you can submit questions. If you give me $1 a month, you can submit questions to a pool of questions on Patreon. I look at all the questions on Patreon. I use my eyeballs. I make a joke about it. And I pick the top couple questions at the end of every single episode, and I read them and answer them on a segment called Ask Zach. Now, that's for people who have money. They want to support me. If you have no money to give, I totally understand. I've been a broke college kid myself. But if you believe in me and if you believe in my dream, and you still want to help me, please help me grow by telling your friends about the show. Share it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, maybe a screenshot it, you put it on your Instagram story. Help me grow by telling your friends about the show. My name is Zach Schaumler. Thank you so very much, and have a great day.